The quantum drill hummed like an off-key choir as it carved through the last layer of compressed duracrete, sending sparks of crystallized matter cascading down into Queen Lyralay's perfectly manicured hands. She brushed them off with practiced ease, her long ears twitching in annoyance at the sound. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should let the excavation drones handle this," suggested Chief Engineer Kexmal, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession, a sure sign of nervousness. "The structural integrity scans show potential instabilities in the—" "Kexmal, I've been drilling holes in things since before you hatched from your egg pod," Lyralay interrupted, not bothering to look up from her work. "Besides, if I wanted safe, I'd have stayed in the throne room counting tax revenues." The drill punched through with a satisfying crack, revealing a chamber beyond. Cool air rushed out, carrying the metallic scent of preserved atmosphere and something else, something organic that had been sleeping for a very long time. Lyralay peered through the opening, her enhanced vision adjusting to the dim blue glow emanating from within. Rows upon rows of cylindrical pods stretched into the darkness, most dark and lifeless, their occupants long since returned to dust. But one, just one, pulsed with that steady azure light. "Well, that's either very good news or very bad news," she muttered, squeezing through the opening with the fluid grace that had made her legendary in the Academy dueling circles. The chamber was clearly human in origin, though the architecture seemed almost quaint compared to modern Zephyrian design. Everything was angular where it should curve, sterile where it should breathe. Yet there was something undeniably functional about it, like a weapon designed by accountants. She approached the active pod, her reflection ghostly in its frosted surface. Inside she could make out the vague outline of a figure, human, male, and remarkably well-preserved for someone who'd been taking the galaxy's longest nap. "Your Majesty," Kexmal's voice echoed from the entrance. "The atmospheric readings are stable, but we're detecting trace amounts of— oh, blast these readings. The scanner keeps insisting there's a human life sign down there, which is obviously malfunctioning because humans are extinct," Lyralay finished. "Yes, I'm aware of the conventional wisdom." She ran her fingers along the pod's control panel, the alien symbols slowly shifting into readable Zephyrian text as her translation implant worked its magic. Though it seems no one bothered to inform this particular specimen. The readout was fascinating. Captain Marcus Chen, Terran Colonial Marines, 34th Deep Strike Battalion. Decorated for valor at the Siege of Procyon, survivor of the massacre at New Byzantium, last defender of Colony 7. The medical data showed him to be in perfect condition, suspended at the moment of what should have been certain death. "Remarkable," she whispered. "He's not just human, he's a war hero. They preserved their best and brightest, hoping someone would find them." "Your Majesty, surely you're not considering—" "Revival, of course I am." Lyralay's grin would have made her royal tutors despair. "When was the last time something genuinely interesting happened around here? Yesterday's excitement was Senator Velnock's 3-hour presentation on grain subsidies. But the political implications, the treaties, will be absolutely fascinating to navigate." She began activating the revival sequence, each button press causing new systems to hum to life. "Besides, imagine the look on Chancellor Vexter's face when I introduce him to our new houseguest." The pod began to warm, its surface clearing as ancient mechanisms stirred to life. Inside, Captain Marcus Chen remained peacefully unconscious, blissfully unaware that his 3-century nap was about to end, with the galaxy's most dangerous queen standing over him like some sort of very attractive, very powerful alarm clock. "This is going to be fun," Lyralay said, her ears practically vibrating with anticipation. Marcus's eyes opened to a ceiling that definitely wasn't regulation military gray. Instead, he found himself staring at what appeared to be a holographic star map that shifted and pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. Either he'd died and gone to a very technologically advanced heaven, or something had gone spectacularly wrong with the emergency protocols. "Ah, Sleeping Beauty awakens," came a melodious voice with an accent he couldn't place. "Though I must say, you're considerably less hairy than the fairy tales suggested." He turned his head, a movement that sent shooting pains through muscles that felt like they'd been marinated in liquid nitrogen, to see a woman unlike any he'd ever encountered. She was undeniably beautiful, with features that were almost human except for the delicately pointed ears that twitched with what seemed like amusement. "Where?" Marcus croaked, his voice sounding like sandpaper scraping against concrete. "What year is it?" "Well, that depends on which calendar you prefer," she replied, settling gracefully into a chair that materialized from the floor at her approach. "According to your human dating system, it's been roughly 312 years since you decided to take your extended beauty sleep." The words hit him like a meteor strike. 300 years. Everyone he'd known, everyone he'd fought beside, everyone he'd tried to save, all dust and memory now. "I can see the gears turning in there," the woman said gently. "It's a lot to process. I'm Queen Lyrelei, by the way, sovereign ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, and as of yesterday, your official guardian and protector. Try not to let it go to your head." "Guardian." Marcus managed to sit up, though the room spun like a carnival ride. "What happened to Earth, the colonies, the war?" Lyrelei's expression softened. "Humanity fought bravely, but the odds were overwhelming. Your species was declared extinct approximately 2 centuries ago." She paused, then added with a wry smile, "Though clearly your people's grasp of proper extinction protocols needs work." A medical droid. At least he assumed it was medical, given the array of scanners and injectors sprouting from its chrome surface, whirred over to check his vitals. It spoke in a series of electronic chirps that somehow sounded disapproving. "Dr. Zeikswin says your cellular regeneration is proceeding normally, though he's concerned about your primitive immune system," Lyrelei translated. "I assured him that humans were notoriously difficult to kill, which is how you ended up here in the first place." Marcus tried to stand, nearly toppling over as his legs remembered their function with all the grace of a newborn giraffe. "I need to. There must be others. Other pods, other survivors." "We checked. You're the only active unit." Lyrelei rose smoothly, steadying him with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "Though if it helps, your service record makes for fascinating reading. Apparently, you once held off an entire enemy battalion with nothing but a plasma rifle and what your commanding officer described as suicidal bravery." "Just following orders," Marcus muttered, though he couldn't help but notice how her touch sent warmth through his still-awakening nervous system. "Yes, well, I have new orders for you," she said, guiding him toward what looked like a nutrition dispensary. "First, you're going to eat something that isn't 3-century-old military rations. Second, you're going to let my staff explain how indoor plumbing works in the 38th century. Trust me, it's an improvement. Third, you're going to help me figure out why half my council wants to dissect you, and the other half wants to put you in a zoo." The nutrition unit produced something that looked like scrambled eggs, but tasted like the best meal he'd ever eaten. "Zoo. Oh yes, you're quite the celebrity. The Last Human has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Though personally, I prefer the Queen's new pet project." Her ears twitched again, and he was starting to realize it meant she was enjoying herself. "It's driving Chancellor Vexter absolutely mad, which is really just a delightful bonus." Marcus paused mid-bite. "You revived me to annoy a politician." "Among other reasons, yes." Lyrelei settled back into her chair, which adjusted its shape to accommodate her perfectly. "Though I must admit, I'm also curious about what makes a human worth preserving for 3 centuries. Your people went to considerable expense to keep you on ice. Maybe they just had poor judgment. Or maybe," she said, leaning forward with genuine interest, "they knew exactly what they were doing." The Zephyrian High Council chamber buzzed with the kind of tension that usually preceded either groundbreaking legislation or spectacular political bloodshed. Marcus stood beside Queen Lyrale's floating throne, trying not to gawk at the assembled delegates who ranged from vaguely humanoid to something that looked like a sentient crystalline formation wearing ceremonial robes. "So this is the infamous human relic," Chancellor Vexter announced, his voice dripping with the kind of disdain usually reserved for expired milk. His species apparently communicated through color-changing facial crests, which were currently pulsing an alarming shade of purple. "I must say, Your Majesty, he's considerably less impressive than his reputation suggested." "Thank you, Chancellor," Marcus replied before Lyrale could respond. "I was going for disappointingly ordinary. It's a tactical advantage. Enemies underestimate you right before you punch them in their color-changing face parts." The chamber erupted in what Marcus hoped was laughter from the delegates, though with some species it was difficult to tell. Vexter's crest turned an even deeper purple. "The human speaks," Senator Krilvin observed, her insectoid mandibles clicking with what seemed like approval, "though I question the wisdom of teaching extinct species our languages." "Actually, I'm using a neural translation implant," Marcus said. "Apparently, human brains are compatible with Zephyrian technology, which your medical staff found disturbingly adaptable." "Which brings us to the real issue," interrupted Trade Minister Elixara, whose gelatinous form rippled with agitation. "The Galactic Preservation Treaty clearly states that extinct species cannot be granted political status. This human is technically contraband." Lyrale's ears twitched dangerously. "Are you suggesting I've violated interstellar law, Minister?" "I'm suggesting," Elixara continued, apparently oblivious to the warning signs, "that harboring this specimen could destabilize our entire trade network. The Andromedans have already filed a formal complaint." "The Andromedans," Marcus said conversationally, "wouldn't happen to be the same species that tried to genocide my people, would they?" "Well, yes, but that was business," Vexter replied. "Nothing personal." "Right, I'll try to remember that when I'm not taking it personally." Defense Minister Kexton, a being who resembled an armored bear crossed with a particularly aggressive houseplant, leaned forward. "The tactical applications are intriguing. Human military doctrine emphasizes improvisation and adaptability, qualities our forces sometimes lack. Are you seriously discussing weaponizing our guest?" Lyrale asked, though her tone suggested she found the idea more amusing than appalling. "Not weaponizing," Kexton clarified. "Consulting. His service record indicates expertise in asymmetric warfare and last-stand scenarios." "Ah, yes," Marcus said. "Nothing says qualified consultant like being the sole survivor of multiple military disasters." "Actually, that's exactly what qualifies you," Kexton replied seriously. "Our generals have never faced true desperation. They've forgotten how to fight when everything is lost." The debate continued for another hour, with various factions proposing everything from scientific study to political asylum to what sounded suspiciously like gladiatorial combat. Marcus found himself oddly entertained by the political maneuvering, though he noticed several delegates eyeing him like a particularly interesting specimen. "If I may," he finally interjected during a particularly heated exchange about property rights, "I'd like to point out that I'm standing right here. And while I appreciate being discussed like a fascinating archaeological find, I do have opinions about my own future." "Such as?" Lyrale asked, genuinely curious. "Such as wanting to be useful. Your Majesty gave me a second chance at life when she could have left me frozen. The least I can do is earn my keep." "And how exactly does an extinct human soldier propose to serve the Zephyrian Empire?" Vexter demanded. Marcus grinned. "Well, Chancellor, you've got politicians trying to kill your queen, trade disputes that look suspiciously like acts of war, and enemies who think they understand how you'll respond to threats. Sounds like you could use someone who specializes in impossible situations." "You're offering to become the Queen's personal bodyguard?" Senator Krilvin asked. "I'm offering to become whatever she needs me to be," Marcus replied, meeting Lyralay's gaze. After all, what's the worst that could happen? I'm already supposed to be dead. Lyralay's smile could have powered a small star destroyer. Motion to grant Captain Chen provisional citizenship and advisory status, all in favor. The vote was closer than Marcus had hoped, but it passed. As the delegates filed out, most still muttering about precedents and legal complications, Vexter approached them. "This isn't over," he warned quietly. "No," Lyralay agreed cheerfully. "I suspect it's just getting started." The assassination attempt came during the morning briefing, which Marcus thought showed a disappointing lack of imagination. If he were planning to kill a queen, he'd at least wait until after breakfast when everyone's reflexes were sluggish from carbohydrate overload. The energy blade materialized from what appeared to be a harmless holographic display, slicing through the air where Lyralay's head had been moments before. Fortunately, Marcus's paranoid human instincts had kicked in the moment he noticed the janitor in the corner hadn't actually been cleaning anything for the past 10 minutes. "Down!" he shouted, tackling the queen behind her ornate desk just as plasma bolts began scorching the walls where they'd been standing. "Well, this is cozy," Lyralay observed from their impromptu hiding spot. "Though next time you feel the need to throw me to the floor, perhaps a dinner invitation first." "I'll make a note for the etiquette manual," Marcus replied, drawing the ceremonial pulse pistol he'd been issued. "How many exits does this room have?" "2 official ones, 3 unofficial ones, and 1 that I'm not supposed to know about but definitely do." More energy blasts peppered their cover. Marcus counted at least 4 different weapon signatures. This wasn't a lone assassin but a coordinated strike team. "Your Majesty," came a sickeningly polite voice from across the room, "if you surrender the human, we can make this relatively painless." "Counteroffer," Lyralay called back. "You surrender to me, and I'll make sure you get a fair trial before the execution." "I was hoping you'd say that," the voice replied. Marcus peered around the desk's edge, quickly mapping the room's layout. The attackers had positioned themselves well, professional work. Unfortunately for them, they'd planned for fighting a queen and her guards, not a human soldier who'd learned tactics in wars where honor was a luxury no one could afford. "The ventilation shaft behind you leads directly to the armory," Lyralay whispered, "though it's a bit undignified for royal escapes." "Undignified beats dead every time," Marcus replied, "but we're not running." "Oh, and why not?" "Because they made a tactical error." He began reprogramming his pulse pistol's energy output, overriding the safety protocols in ways that would have horrified the weapon's designers. "They assumed you'd fight like a Zephyrian." "How terribly inconsiderate of them." Marcus smiled grimly. "Human military doctrine lesson 1. If you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough." He rolled the modified pistol across the floor like a grenade. The weapon's overloaded power cell created a brilliant flash that temporarily overloaded the attacker's enhanced vision systems. A neat trick that worked on most species, but would have been useless against human eyes. In the moments of confusion that followed, Marcus moved with the fluid brutality that had made him legendary in the colonial Marines. The first assassin went down to a perfectly aimed nerve strike, the second to an improvised chokehold that worked surprisingly well on Andromedan physiology. "Behind you," Lyralay called out, apparently having abandoned her hiding spot to watch the show. Marcus spun, catching the third attacker's weapon arm and using the alien's own momentum to send him crashing into the wall with a satisfying thud. The fourth assassin, displaying admirable survival instincts, had already begun retreating toward the window. "Oh no, you don't," Marcus muttered, grabbing a ceremonial Zephyrian war spear from the wall display and hurling it with practiced precision. The weapon's gravitic tip activated on impact, pinning the fleeing assassin to the wall by his clothing. "Well," Lyralay said, surveying the aftermath with obvious satisfaction, "that was refreshingly direct. Though I do hope you're planning to replace my spear. It's a family heirloom." "I'll add it to my tab," Marcus replied, checking the unconscious attackers for identification. Andromedan operatives just like we suspected, though they're carrying Tyrellian neural scramblers and using modified vegan energy blades. A joint operation then, how wonderfully complicated. The security team finally arrived, looking embarrassed at having missed what was apparently a fairly spectacular fight. Captain Zexmil, the head of palace security, stared at the carnage with all four of his eyes. "Your Majesty, we had no indication that." "That's because they came through the old service tunnels," Marcus interrupted, pointing to scuff marks on the wall that everyone else had missed. Someone gave them detailed architectural plans and security rotations. This was an inside job. Lyralay's ears flattened against her head, never a good sign. How wonderfully treasonous. "Captain Zexmil, I want every member of my council investigated. Someone wanted me dead badly enough to hire multiple species to do it." "Of course, Your Majesty, though if I may ask, how did you know about the service tunnels?" Marcus grinned. "Lucky guess. Plus, in my experience, when politicians want you dead, they always know exactly where you'll be and when you'll be there." "Such a cheerful worldview," Lyralay observed. "No wonder your species was so hard to kill." "We had practice." The trial of Chancellor Vexter and his co-conspirators had lasted 3 days, which Marcus considered impressively efficient for a galactic-scale treason case. The evidence had been overwhelming. Encrypted communications with Andromedan agents, financial records showing payments from no fewer than 5 hostile species, and what the prosecution had delightfully termed an embarrassing abundance of stupid decisions documented in writing. "I still can't believe he kept receipts," Marcus said, reviewing the final testimony transcripts in Lyralay's private study. "In my day, traders at least had the courtesy to cover their tracks." "Vexter always was thorough to a fault," Lyralay replied, signing the execution orders with a flourish that suggested she was rather enjoying herself. "Though I admit, finding detailed invasion plans in his personal files was a nice touch. Really saved time on the investigation." The past 6 months had transformed both of them in ways neither had expected. Marcus had evolved from a confused refugee from the past into something unprecedented. A human advisor to an alien queen, bridging 3 centuries of military doctrine with cutting-edge Zephyrian technology. His tactical innovations had already been adopted by the Royal Guard. His survival training had become mandatory for palace security, and his ability to think like humanity's enemies had proven invaluable in understanding their current adversaries. "The Andromedan ambassador is requesting a formal audience," Chief of Staff Melvara announced, her scaled features arranged in what Marcus had learned to recognize as barely contained amusement. Apparently, they wished to clarify certain misunderstandings regarding their recent diplomatic activities. By diplomatic activities, they mean the part where they tried to have me assassinated, Lyralay asked sweetly. "That would be the misunderstanding they're hoping to clarify, yes." Marcus stood, stretching muscles that had finally adapted to 38th century gravity generators. "What's our negotiating position?" "Well, we have 4 of their operatives in custody, documented proof of their involvement in a conspiracy against the crown, and several dead bodies that used to belong to their hired killers," Lyralay said thoughtfully. "I'd say our position is unconditional surrender or we glass their homeworld." "I love it when you talk strategy," Marcus said, earning a laugh that made her ears twitch in that way he'd grown to treasure. "Though perhaps we could offer them the illusion of saving face. Beaten enemies are more useful than martyred ones." The transformation hadn't been one-sided. Lyralay had discovered that ruling through fear and political calculation, while effective, was considerably less satisfying than having someone she could trust absolutely. Marcus's loyalty wasn't bought with titles or threats. It was earned through shared danger and genuine affection, something rarer than quantum crystals in her world. "There's something else," she said, pulling up a holographic display that showed ship movements throughout the sector. Intelligence reports suggest the Andromedan defeat has encouraged other species to reconsider their relationship with us. 3 systems have requested protection agreements, and the Rigelian Confederacy wants to discuss a mutual defense pact. Fear of humans, even extinct ones, travels fast, Marcus observed. Fear of what humans can do when properly motivated, she corrected. Your people's reputation for creative violence has remained intact despite the centuries. The door chimed, and Dr. Zeichswin entered with his usual electronic disapproval. His latest scans showed that Marcus's integration with Zephyrian technology had exceeded all expectations. His nervous system had adapted to their neural interfaces so completely that he could now operate most systems by thought alone. The human's cellular regeneration continues to surprise us, the medical droid announced. His estimated lifespan has increased significantly. He may live as long as a Zephyrian. How convenient, Lyreley said, though her smile suggested she found it more than merely convenient. They'd been dancing around their feelings for months, professional duty and the sheer impossibility of their situation keeping them at arm's length. But the assassination attempt had burned away the last pretenses. When someone tries to kill the person you care about most, political complications suddenly seem rather trivial. There's one more thing, Marcus said, producing a small device he'd been working on in his spare time. I've been analyzing the quantum resonance patterns in your crown jewels. They're not just ceremonial, they're components of a massive defensive array. Lyreley stared at him. How could you possibly know that? Because humans used similar technology 3 centuries ago, just on a much smaller scale. Your ancestors didn't just invite my people here for diplomatic reasons. They were studying our defensive systems. The implications hung in the air like a revelation. The Zephyrian Empire's most closely guarded secret, and a human refugee had solved it in 6 months by applying ancient Terran engineering principles to alien technology. So, Lyreley said finally, not only have you reorganized my military, improved my security, eliminated my enemies, and saved my life multiple times, but you've also unlocked the greatest mystery in our empire's history. Pretty much, yeah. And you're planning to stay, even though you could demand any reward, any position, any. Marcus stepped closer, close enough to see the hope and uncertainty in her eyes. I'm planning to stay because this is where I belong now, with you, if you'll have a soldier who's technically been dead for 3 centuries. Her kiss was his answer, and when they finally broke apart, her ears were twitching with pure joy. Besides, he added, grinning, someone has to keep you out of trouble, and given your track record with dangerous decisions, I'd say that's a full-time job. Such dedication to duty, she laughed. No wonder the galaxy feared humans. No, Marcus said, pulling her close. They feared humans because we never knew when to quit. Lucky for you, some habits are hard to break. Outside